CDC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening. As we come back on the air this half hour, we have new reporting here. The toll on first responders. New numbers just in tonight from the New York City Fire Department as they reveal another death in the department from coronavirus. While we were on the air earlier this evening, our John Carl asking the president if he could reassure New Yorkers that they will have enough ventilators. President Trump saying, "We happen to think the governor is well served with ventilators." The president adding, "We're going to find out." The number of deaths surging in the U.S. In New York State alone, 562 deaths in the last 24 hours, the majority, of course, in New York City. In just 2 weeks' time, we've gone from 19,000 cases to tonight, more than 270,000 cases, more than 7,000 dead. And take a look at this graph, the trajectory. We have talked so much about trying to flatten the curve, the United States there in red, shooting straight up, no sign of it leveling off. And of course, the peak in New York, the first epicenter, the governor saying could be more than a week off, perhaps several weeks off. And of course, those difficult images we've been reporting on in New York City, the city running out of space in the morgue, now loading bodies into refrigerated trucks. New York's governor taking executive action, calling on the National Guard to take possessions of ventilators from other medical facilities elsewhere in the state that do not need them, to get them to the hospitals in need right now in New York. The president also late today saying the CDC would be issuing new guidance suggesting voluntary use of non-medical masks or face coverings when Americans leave home. Voluntary, though, he quickly pointed out. We do begin with ABC's Whit Johnson right here in New York tonight.
Tonight, outside one hospital in Brooklyn, a somber walk. A team of doctors moving a COVID victim to a mobile morgue, an increasingly familiar sight in this stricken city.
The morgue space is filling up. This grim picture outside Bellevue Hospital, about a dozen of these refrigerator trucks lined up to hold the dead.
Overnight, the death toll in New York State jumping to nearly 3,000.
Highest single increase in the number of deaths since we started.
Funeral homes overwhelmed.
16% of them in this room are COVID patients.
Pat Marmo delivered tough news to grieving families.
I would love to pick up Grandma now and have her on my roof where I could watch her, but I don't have the accommodation to get her right now.
Tonight, across America, the National Guard built in Michigan and Connecticut, disinfecting nursing homes in Georgia. But here in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo giving the troops different marching orders to seize ventilators from medical facilities with lower needs and redeploy them to hospitals in crisis.
I'm not going to let people die because we didn't redistribute ventilators.
The Trump administration has criticized states begging for supplies, accusing them of exaggerating the need.
The notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile. It's not supposed to be state stockpiles that they then use.
But today from the president, a pledge.
We will take every action and will spare no resource, financial, medical, scientific. We will not spare anything. We'll get it back into shape, the Empire State.
In New York today, staggering numbers. More than 100,000 people testing positive for coronavirus. Victoria, a school nurse, is one of them.
I am worried about me. I don't want to go out like this. I'm afraid. But I'm afraid that I'm not going to get a chance to see my family again. I'm afraid for what's going to happen to our country.
Tonight, mounting pressure on the governors who have refused to issue stay-at-home orders. 1 week ago, KIV of Alabama was defiant.
We are not Louisiana, we are not New York State, we are not California, and right now is not the time to order people to shelter in place.
Today, there are 1,300 people testing positive for COVID in Alabama. 21 have died. Ivy now announcing a stay-at-home order effective this Saturday. Missouri tonight issuing its own order. In Florida, where a stay-at-home order only took effect today, cases spiked 20% in just 24 hours. Georgia held out until earlier this week, the governor insisting he only now learned that people without symptoms could spread the disease.
This is a game changer for us.
But that information has been widely known for weeks. President Trump has resisted pushing holdout states to act, but Dr. Anthony Fauci has been blunt.
If you look at what's going on in this country, I just don't understand why we're not doing that. We really should be.
Tonight, President Trump with an announcement about masks.
The CDC is advising the use of non-medical cloth face covering as an additional voluntary public health measure. So it's voluntary, you don't have to do it.
Let's get back to Whit Johnson this half hour. And we took note that while we were on the air the last half hour, our John Carl actually asked the president if he could assure New Yorkers there would be enough ventilators. The president's response?
David, the president was direct. He said no. He said that New York should have had more ventilators at the time. We know that Governor Cuomo has been asking for thousands more, but tonight the president saying, quote, "We happen to think that he is well served with ventilators," adding, "We're going to find out." But Governor Cuomo taking matters into his own hands, deploying the National Guard to go out there and seize and redistribute ventilators to where they're needed most. David?
Whit Johnson leading us off again this half hour with thank you. We have new reporting now on workers across this country in other lines of work considered essential. They are still showing up for work. They are the heroes too, at great risk. From bus drivers to postal carriers, many of them coming down with the virus as well. Tonight from our ABC station KGO in San Francisco, here's Kristen Z.
Tonight, many employees who showed up for work before and after the warnings went out are fighting the virus, from bus drivers to lottery workers. Mike Aravallo, a sales rep for the California Lottery, tested positive for the virus last week, ending up in the hospital just days later.
From there on, it was just downhill. They were going to have to induce him into a coma to have his body rest.
The federal government says up to 62 million workers were deemed essential before the outbreak. 13 days ago, Detroit bus driver Jason Hargrove went on Facebook to complain about a woman who refused to cover her mouth while coughing on his bus.
For you to get on the bus and cough several times without covering up your mouth, and you know that we in the middle of a pandemic, that lets me know that some folks don't care.
Hargrove died Wednesday after being infected with the virus. Tonight, the TSA is reporting the first COVID-19 death of one of its officers, 39-year-old Frank Bocabella. And from here in California to New York, Instacart shoppers are threatening to strike over unsafe work conditions.
I'm playing Russian roulette every time I go out there. Every time I shop, every time I come into a grocery store.
The company now promising to provide their employees face masks, hand sanitizers, and thermometers.
And you know, it's these workers who are keeping our communities across this country up and running, the grocery store workers, the transit workers, the bus drivers. And Kristen Z from our ABC station KGO in San Francisco is with us tonight. And Kristen, I know officials are actually taking action to keep city workers like those bus drivers safe across the country.
You're absolutely right, David. The mayor of Detroit is urging everyone in the city and the country to watch Hargrove's heartbreaking video. And officials are now only allowing passengers to enter and exit through the rear doors to avoid direct contact with drivers. And here in San Francisco, we've had transit operators testing positive for COVID-19, so that fear very real here too. David?
All right, Kristen Z in San Francisco. Kristen, our thanks to you and the entire team at KGO tonight. They continue to report on this story. Remarkable work there. And we know doctors continue to warn about the ventilators. Tonight, one saying it's like we're playing musical chairs, already forced to juggle them between patients. This half hour, we're one-on-one with California's governor on the urgent push, not just for ventilators, but for protective gear in California. Here's Matt Gutman with the governor.
Tonight, the virus continues to tear through the ranks of frontline workers. ICU nurse Larissa Anderson, the latest casualty, the 46-year-old mother of two. She'd been tirelessly treating COVID-19 patients in New Orleans.
They're not trying to be superheroes. They run towards, the tragedy like when everyone else runs the opposite way.
In some states, up to 1 in 5 COVID-positive patients are healthcare workers. We've been following up with Dr. Ed Latham for 2 weeks now.
When I'm coming home, I can take a deep breath and I can fill my lungs, and then all I want to do is cry because I don't know what else to do with the emotion anymore.
In Detroit, doctors say they are already juggling those life-saving ventilators.
We are running out of ventilators, and I feel like we're playing musical chairs with the ventilators we have on right now.
That as the scramble for supplies accelerates.
So what do you say to healthcare workers that are ordering trash bags? That they're not getting enough PPE?
It's unacceptable that they are, and all I can say is we hear you.
Which is why California's Governor Gavin Newsom is telling us the state is buying as much PPE as it can on the open market.
Are you finding yourself bidding against other governors in other states for PPE?
Yeah, no question. And we're bidding against the federal government. But that said, we also are one of the largest purchasers in the world. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and as a consequence, we can outbid most.
What states like California are not doing?
Not waiting around for someone on a white horse to come save the day.
Not you, the federal government.
Not even the federal government.
And yet every day, flickers of hope. That gauntlet of cheerleaders at Phoebe Putney Memorial in Georgia. Their second patient off a ventilator.
We need to see those moments too. We're going to try to bring them to you every night. The patients recovering from this. And Matt, we know the risk for healthcare workers on the front lines. Authorities say they're especially vulnerable given really the level of exposure to the virus.
And David, that's because the experts tell us that viruses can act like poison. The higher the concentration and the dosage, the more fatal they can be. And so you combine extreme proximity with the sickest of the sick and sometimes inadequate PPE, and that makes for a dangerous combination for healthcare workers. David.
All right, Matt Gutman on this Friday night. Matt, thanks. The new numbers tonight on job loss in this country, and it comes after we learned the staggering 10 million Americans had already applied for unemployment benefits in just the past 2 weeks. Tonight, the official government report out today showing 701,000 jobs were lost in March, the first loss since 2010. Here's our chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, tonight.
Tonight, after the worst monthly jobs report in a decade, those $1,200 checks can't come soon enough for millions of out-of-work Americans. And now, America's 30 million small business owners are scrambling to get their share of the $350 billion in paycheck protection loans backed by the government.
We went from having a thriving 40-year-old business to having it be shuttered overnight.
We need help. We need relief. The loan's a lifeline for small companies to help keep Americans employed. As long as companies don't fire their workers, they won't have to pay back the loans. But tonight, many say they're struggling to get access to the money.
And I was immediately rejected because I don't have an existing loan with them.
Bank of America started accepting applications on its website at 8:45 this morning.
We are prioritizing. We have 1 million borrowing customers we're trying to get through the system first.
The bottom line is we can't pay our staff.
Pat Fuge owns a toy store in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He went to his local bank instead of one of the big ones.
The other national chains that we work with aren't even ready to process applications at this point.
David, as for those stimulus checks, it's clear those who get their tax refund by direct deposit will start to see the money coming into their accounts in about 2 weeks. What's less clear is what happens to those who get their tax refund by check. They could be waiting up to 5 months before they see that stimulus money. It's something we've pressed the Treasury Secretary on, and we will continue to do so. David?
I know you will, Rebecca. Thanks so much for that. Next tonight, the Navy captain relieved of duty on that U.S. aircraft carrier after sounding the alarm about the safety of his own sailors after so many of them tested positive. There was a remarkable moment today. He was cheered by his crew as he was forced to leave the ship. Here's Martha Raddatz.
If there was any doubt how the sailors of the Roosevelt felt about their captain, it is very clear tonight. One last look and a wave goodbye. Brett Crozier walked down the ramp from the carrier for the last time, relieved of duty. A mass of sailors cheering him with chants of Captain Crozier. The letter that got Crozier fired was a plea to Navy leadership to get the majority of his nearly 5,000 sailors off the ship as soon as possible, given the rapid spread of coronavirus on board. The Secretary of the Navy didn't accuse him of leaking the letter to the press, but showing poor judgment by not going through proper channels.
Relieving of him of command was in the best interest of the United States Navy.
Those on the crew I have been in contact with say they are totally disheartened by the Navy's actions, and one mother of a sailor we spoke to today said watching the captain walk off the ship brought her to tears. David?
All right, Martha Raddatz on this all week long. Thank you. We have been reporting on the families separated from their loved ones as those loved ones then fight to survive the virus alone in the hospital. Of course, family members can't go because of concern they'll get the virus at the hospital. Today we hear from families, including the parents of a 26-year-old on a ventilator, no underlying conditions, and the moment he begins to speak again. Here's Juju Chang.
And that was the last time we saw him.
Daryl Ramos' young son, Taylor, is one of the outliers. Young, otherwise healthy, before COVID-19. The 26-year-old flight attendant on a ventilator for nearly 2 weeks.
One of the hardest things is when he's asking, well, if I go on the ventilator, do you know how long I'm going to be on it?
Taylor's family stayed in touch the only way they could.
Hey, Taylor, this is Dad.
and Mom.
Anxiously awaiting any call from the hospital.
Hello, this is Daryl.
The doctor has good news. Taylor is now breathing on his own.
Oh, that is awesome.
And then the moment they're all waiting for.
Hello, Taylor. Hey, oh, Taylor.
Can you say hi, Mom?
Awesome.
So many families across this country battling this disease together, but apart. Amanda Pomachan's husband, Titu, is now home after 3 weeks in the hospital. What was that moment like for both of you?
It was the most joy I've ever felt. It really was. It felt like everything was whole finally again.
It felt like busting out of jail.
Those precious video chats with his wife and his 3 little girls keeping him going. Even the